Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today I'm going to be telling you a verbal short story of fantasy adventure titled IronGrove, Brigands. Alright, so we join our heroes, our band of heroes, as they travel from Bromark, a small village, to Castle Edling. Our band of heroes, of course, are Brennan Horst, a human fighter, and Ralna Aviri, a human wizard, Gorvis Arhelm, a dwarf cleric, and finally Zyle, an elf thief. Alright, so they are traveling along a dirt road. They're all on foot, and currently Brennan and Ralna and Gorvis are all in the middle of the road, and they're just walking along. The road, of course, is dirt, and there is forest 50 to 75 feet on both sides of the road. Okay, so they're kind of hemmed in by the forest itself, but they know that this road heads generally toward Castle Edling, right? And they're in about their second day of travel, okay? They're going along the road when suddenly Brennan Horst sees ahead, and he's got the best eyesight, and he says to Ralna and Gorvis, he says, "Oh, a woodcutter ahead." Sure enough, the woodcutter heads toward them, and as the woodcutter gets closer to them, all three of our heroes notice that there's a little boy behind the woodcutter who is also carrying on his back essentially twines of wood that they've collected from near the forest, and that they're bringing back to their village to burn or to sell, right? And so Ralna immediately heads out in front of Brennan and Gorvis, and goes up, and she says, "Oh, woodcutter!" And the woodcutter stops, and he says, "Oh, my lady, are ye a wizard?" And she says, "Why, yes, of course." She says, "Are you traveling to your village?" And he says, "Indeed we are." He says, "Will you be needing some wood for your camping this evening?" And Ralna says, "Of course we will." She says, "We'll take 2 of your twinings," right? And so immediately the woodcutter, pulls off his heavy pack, all he had, and he takes the axe off of his pack and pulls off 2 twinings, and begins to take off 2 twinings, but his little son, he pulls off a twining, and the woodcutter turns to his son, takes one of his son's twining, and whispers to Ralna, "I hope you'll not mind a smaller twining." And Ralna says, no, that'll be fine. So he hands her his son's smaller twining of brambles and his own twining of brambles. And Ralna at that point immediately goes into her robes, right? And she takes out a small leather pouch, right? And she says, "Good woodcutter." She says, Please, I know it is 5 coppers for twinings usually, correct?" And he says, "That is correct, my lady." And so she says, "Oh, well, excellent," right? And she says, "Now, here is enough for both, but please don't count these coppers now. There might be a little extra in there for the boy." And at first the woodcutter kind of frowns, right? Because he's thinking maybe he's getting taken, right? But immediately Ralna gives him a big bright smile, right? And the dwarf, Gorvis, steps forward, and he nods his head like you could trust her, right? And so the woodcutter thinks twice. He kind of strokes his chin, and he says, "So be it." And he just takes the little pouch, he puts it into his his near his belt, and him and the little boy gather their twinings, and they continue forward, right? And Brennan, then Brennan, Gorvis, and Ralna all begin to walk down the road away, in the opposite direction of the woodcutters. And Brennan goes, "That's so wasteful, Ralna. You could have used those gold coins not coppers, am I right? And Ralna kind of smiles again, and Gorvis claps Ralna on her back, and he says, "Well done, Ralna. I disagree with Brennan. I think your kindness is much needed in these parts." Right? And Ralna kind of, shrugs her shoulders, and Brennan just shakes his head, realizing that Ralna has just paid 10 gold instead of 10 copper for 2 twinings of wood that they'll burn at their camp this night, right? So the 3 of them just kind of continue on, and the day is getting hotter, when all of a sudden, the 3 of them are kind of continuing forward. And now there's berms on the side of the road, right? So these small hills that are, and suddenly a black arrow zips out from the trees and strikes one of the berms in the side, right? Now this was shot about 20 feet ahead of the 3 as they travel, and immediately the 3 realize it is a signal from the elf thief who is traveling alongside them, out of sight in the forest. Okay. And they immediately perk up, and they look ahead, and they don't see anything in the road ahead, but they know that Zyle has warned them, right? So at this point, the 3 of them are very alert, and sure enough, after traveling about another 200 or 300 feet, they see a dot at the very end of the road. The sun, it's about 3 p.m. And immediately Gorvis wipes sweat from his eyes. And Brennan immediately kind of hitches his belt, which has his long sword on it, and he also takes off his shield, his wooden shield, right, round wooden shield. Okay, he has not drawn his sword, and as they continue forward, they realize that there are 6 men approaching them. And these 6 men are all on horses, right? The men are galloping forward, and they galloped up to about 30 feet. And one of the men, kind of pulls his horse to a stop. The horse kind of circles around. It appears to be a stallion, and Gorvis can tell from that way the stallion is really not behaving itself. That the rider has not had this horse for long, and that also there's a mare with which is one of the other horses that one of the men's, and that the 2 are reacting to each other, right? So Gorvis kind of shakes his head, and the man on the stallion, kind of forcefully calms down the beast, and he shouts down at him. He says, "Ho! We are the regional toll collectors. We're here to collect your toll for traveling along these roads." And immediately, without a single moment of hesitation, Brennan says, "These are free roads. King Ezram and Queen Oa do not collect any tolls for these roads." The man says back, with the 5 other men behind him, right? He looks behind him, and now, Brennan and Gorvis and Ralna all take note of the men behind him. They can see long swords. They can see one of the men has a long bow on his back. They can see daggers, and it even appears that one of the men on his horse, like across the bridle, is holding a mace, right? Kind of a long club, right? And he says, "Oh, is that so? That King Ezram and Queen Oa are not collecting tolls?" And Brennan says, "It is so," right? The fighter, or the human fighter, and the man on the horse, the leader of the group, he says, "As I said, we are regional toll collectors." So at that point, Gorvis speaks up, and he says, "Good sirs, I can tell all of your horses have different saddles, different bridles." He says, "None of them match. Perhaps these are not your horses, just as this is not your road. My good friend Brennan here, he is a fighter. He fights for a living. You are brigands. You brig for a living. I can tell you now, you should go the other way along this road and spare your lives." At this, the lead brigand, laughs, and all his men laugh too, right? And they do look down at their horses, which are all mismatched. because they were stolen from different people, right? And he says, "Oh, my good dwarf," he says, "one, it is surprising to see you out from the Undercities, and two," he says, "you clearly are not good at math. There are 6 of us, and there are 3 of you. You are outnumbered 2 to 1, right?" And Gorvis says, "I truly warn you, sir, please turn around and go the other way." The man begins laughing again, and immediately, without hesitation, Brennan pulls his longsword and throws it end over end, hurtling, past the 30-foot gap, straight into the chest of the lead brigand. The lead brigand looks down at the sword in his chest and just gives out a scream, right? His stallion bucks up, throwing him off. The man falls to the ground with the sword clearly all the way through him, poking out the back, right? And falls off his horse. Immediately, the other five are startled, but after about 2 or 3 seconds, in which Gorvis and Ralna and Brennan are already making preparations for what is to come, right? 2 of the lead brigand's men immediately do exactly what Gorvis said, turn around and run the other way, leaving 3 brigands for Gorvis, Ralna, and Brennan to fight. Brennan, losing not a moment's time, surges forward, right, and runs with his round shield straight toward one of the men on the horses, right? He runs toward him, and the man on the horse is beginning to get his longbow off. Brennan grabs his arm, pulls him directly off of the horse, and kicks him in the face, right? Gorvis, at that point, grabs his hammer off of his back and runs forward. His hammer is very very top heavy. It's large. It's like almost shaped like a brick on its hammer end, right? And it's about 1 foot long, with a large brick-like shape at the top, and it shines completely silver. And then beneath it is the handle, which is also silver, and actually covered in the history of his own family, right? Which is actually engraved into the silver handle, and then etched, and inside of it is etched with black. Okay, but Gorvis pulls this hammer out, runs forward, and actually then has to stop when he gets close to one of the men pulling off his longsword, who clangs the longsword down at him. Gorvis holds up his hammer, blocking the blow, and at that point, Ralna begins to simply step back. Okay, surprisingly, she begins to cast no spells. Right at this point, one of the other man with the longsword leaps off of his horse and takes a swinging swipe at Brennan. His sword clangs against Brennan's half plate near the top, hitting him on the upper arm, and there's a clang as his armor takes the blow, and immediately Brennan grabs the bridle of the horse that's near him and pulls the horse around, right, and begins to step forward. Once he has removed himself from a distance of about 6 to 8 feet from the person who had just taken the swipe at him, he slaps the horse on the side, and the horse then kicks backwards, striking the man who had just struck Brennan with his longsword. Okay. At this point, Gorvis actually takes his hammer back again, and the brigand on the horse circles around, rears his horse up, and the horse kicks Gorvis straight in the chest. Gorvis falls onto the ground, and at that point, the man begins to leap off of his horse. As soon as he does, thunk! A black arrow sprouts out of his chest as he is right above Gorvis, right? At this point, the man looks down at his own chest, and thunk, another arrow goes into his arm, right? At this point, 2 of the remaining 3 have been dealt with, and the final 3rd gentleman, who is now off of his horse, looks around and then immediately runs toward the forest, right? And at that point, Ralna, who has not cast a single spell, quickly comes forward and helps Gorvis up, right? And at this point, Gorvis, Ralna actually, kind of kneels down to help Gorvis, and is saying, Gorvis, are you okay? He's out of wind, and Brennan immediately gets up, walks over, pulls his sword out of the chest of the brigand leader, and gives him a swift kick in his side, right? And then kneels down toward him and begins to whisper in his ear. And Ralna is like, Brennan, is he okay? And Brennan looks over to Ralna, just kind of shakes his head, right? And then positions himself, blocking the sight of the man's chest and head from Ralna and Gorvis. Ralna takes a few more minutes, settles Gorvis, helps him to stand up, right? And at this point, all of them collect themselves. Ralna shouts into the forest. She says, Zyle, thank you. She looks. She doesn't see anyone in the forest, right? And at that point, Gorvis, finally collecting himself, getting his wind back, actually takes a moment, and he calls upon the blessings of his demigod Lux, the demigod of light, and he heals the small nick that Brennan had received from the one longsword carrier who had struck him successfully. Even with his armor, there was a small nick, and Gorvis is able to very quickly, easily heal this wound. Gorvis checks over Ralna, and Ralna, tells him they never even came near me, no problems, right? And Gorvis, shakes his head. He's happy to hear that Ralna is okay. And at that point, the rest of them, after having collected themselves, continue forward on the road until they reach the Silver Stag. When they reach the Silver Stag, it's nighttime, and they had thought that they would need to camp. They didn't. And so when they get close to the inn, Ralna leaves the 2 twined brambles outside and hands them to one of the stable boys and says, you're welcome to use this here in your inn if you need them. All 3 of them go into the Silver Stag, and at that point, they are very happy to be out, to not have a night where they have to camp on the road. Brennan spends his night gambling, losing badly. Gorvis spends his night spreading the good word of his demigod Lux, the demigod of light, and then basically Ralna spends the evening talking with locals and working on a new spell she's been crafting, right? And the last thing that happens is before they go to their rooms for the evening, Ralna orders from the innkeeper all of their freshest, a plate filled with their freshest vegetables and fruit. She takes these fresh vegetables and fruit outside into the darkness, right, alone, right? She goes about 300 feet away from the inn, and she comes close to the edge of the forest, and there she leaves the plate on a rock close to the edge of the forest. About another half an hour later, she's looking out the window of the inn, and she sees Zyle, the cloaked elf thief, slip out very quickly and grab the plate and kind of bring it back into the forest. And at that point, Ralna, knowing that Zyle has been able to have a decent meal for the evening, Ralna tells Brennan he's lost enough coin for the night, and encourages Gorvis as well that they should all go take advantage of the 3 rooms they've purchased, and they all go about doing that. And that is the tale of IronGrove brigands. Thank you very much for listening to my verbal short story of fantasy adventure. Please let me know what you think in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.